All good. So one of the other ones, again, that feeds on from this, and this is quite a big question, but I think it's a really useful one to kind of bring up with lots of people, is how do you decide when to coach somebody into a better position versus just enhance their physical qualities in a gym and then just give them a non-coached sprinting task on pitch? Let's go. James, do you want to start us off, mate?
Oh, yeah, that's quite a big one.
Hospital pass, mate. Off you go.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rich. I guess for me, it's got to start with some kind of analysis and understanding of where the athlete is at and what the purpose of their speed-related work is. So, provided the athlete is not carrying a physical complaint and they don't have a history of injuries for which sprinting or high-speed running were the underlying mechanisms and other risk factors can be ruled out, then, certainly at times we've just got to let them loose. And, provided their sprint training is programmed in an appropriate and progressive manner, then we'll need that exposure for them to reach close to the peak output so that they can, get the most speed-related adaptations. And how that looks, is obviously going to vary. It could be in standalone speed sessions, in warm-ups, or accounted for in more game-type situations. However, sometimes it is necessary to modify an individual's technique, for efficiency, injury prevention purposes, or for whatever reasons, or just to improve their, speed performance if we think we can do that. And if we've made the decision to do that, then we've got to make sure that there's a sound rationale as to the technical change that we're trying to make. So, the underlying determinants of speed have been researched quite extensively, and whilst we know, we don't know everything, but thanks to the work of people like JB, we know a reasonable amount about the ground reaction force characteristics that underpin fast sprinting. But the way in which athletes organize their limbs and their bodies and the coordination tendencies to solve those mechanical constraints are not that well known, or not as well known. And that's partly because, different strategies and coordination tendencies between athletes are, or can be adopted to achieve the same sprint performance outcome. And this for me is where, if we're really going to try and measure the effectiveness of our interventions when modifying technique, we've got to be able to longitudinally track that. Yes, we can rely on coach's eye to an extent, but I'm a strong believer in that, in terms of trying to create a more optimal technique for someone, then we've got to find a way to be able to measure what the most consistent change is in their technique that's leading to better sprint performance. So, it's not a straightforward answer to your question, but I think really just having a sound rationale and justification in the first place and understanding where the athlete is in the grand scheme of what's needed for them, it's one of the key things to consider.
JB, were you waiting?
Yeah, totally. That's a very interesting question because once you said to coaches, basically to accelerate more, you need to apply more force like this or like that. That's the first question that comes to mind, is you cannot tell the players, please do that. You just have to find, there's a missing link. And the missing link is kinematics and coordinations. And that's a question that's research needs to tackle now. What kinematics are associated with what type of kinetics? That's the most challenging part, because then we will know what exactly to cue and coach and what maybe is not relevant, because not everything that we cue or coach is actually relevant, and vice versa. And definitely, yes, we need to work more on that. But I think that's some groups in UK are now, I'm specifically speaking about Speedworks and Jonas Dodu, guys like that, they are now going to merge coaching and research to specifically answer that question. So that's something very interesting.
If I can just jump in there again, but it's something I've looked at quite extensively over the past 8 or 9 years as part of my PhD research. And, I can tell you that team sport athletes, and I've looked at this across professional rugby players, professional football players, international women's lacrosse players, there are, you know, multiple strategies that can be adopted to achieve the same sprint outcome.
Output.
And each individual will have a relatively stable sprinting strategy according to the spatial temporal characteristics. And so that's what I tend to track as a outcome measure of the interaction of the angular and joint, the angular and linear kinematics, the underlying kinetics that interact together to produce the outcome of the sprinting action. But so people can solve the same task in a number of different ways. And again, for me, it's, you know, where possible, trying to find out for each individual that, you know, what it is that they need to unlock their performance. And if we're not going to measure it over a period of time, to an extent, we're guessing. Yes, you know, and Jared and Nick, I think, mentioned this early on, that, and same with JB, you know, there might be 3 or 4 general things that we'd look for, but in terms of, you know, the extra 10%, for example, it's not a straightforward thing to answer, in my opinion.